Frederick Douglass was born in Talbot County, Maryland. The year of his birth is unknown, however, because most, if not all, slaves were not allowed to know their exact age. However, he estimates his birth year being around that of 1818. Douglass was separated from his mother, Harriet Bailey, at birth. She unfortunately lost her life when Douglass was around 7 years old. When he was informed, Douglass was barely affected by her death. Frederick's first master was a man they called Captain Anthony. Captain Anthony's overseer was Mr. Plummer. Plummer treated his slaves very poorly. Whippings, thrashings, and other methods of punishment were not uncommon. Douglass sometimes recalls violent events where the captain or Mr. Plummer whipped or thrashed his family or friends. At this point, Douglass is so terrified by the scene, he hides in the closet and prays that he will not be whipped next. Since Douglass is still a child at this point, he is not to work in the fields. Instead, he often accompanies Colonel Lloyd's, the plantation owner's grandson, Daniel, on hunting trips. This is Frederick's advantage, as Daniel slowly becomes more and more attached to the young Douglass. Around the age of 8, Douglass is selected to go to Baltimore and live with Captain Anthony's son-in-law's brother, Hugh Auld. For the next 3 days, Douglass excitedly prepares to live in the city.
Douglass sets sail on a river to Baltimore on a Saturday morning. He looks back to see Lloyd's plantation one more time, praying that he will never see it again. Frederick thanks that day as being the one where he was set free from his slavery. He believes that he had never been sent away, he would have stayed a slave till the day he died. When Frederick arrives, he is touched and humbled by the unprompted kindness from his new mistress, Sophia Auld. He says that it is almost as she has never been touched by the evils of slavery. Unlike other women he had met, Sophia did not scold, punish, or harm him for doing things such as looking her in the eyes or making a minor mistake. When Mrs. Auld begins teaching the young boy the alphabet and small words, Mr. Auld scolds her. Frederick overhears a conversation of telling him not to teach him, because it is education that ruins slaves. Upon realizing he won't be able to continue learning how to read, he writes, "Whilst I was saddened by the thought of losing the aid of my kind mistress, I was gladdened by the invaluable instruction which, by the merest accident, I had gained from my master." Although his educational experience is short-lived, he realizes just how important education is to him. At this point, Frederick understands how white men have been able to keep blacks subservient. Also, Mrs. Auld begins to realize education and slavery do not work hand in hand. She was an apt woman, and little experience soon demonstrated to her satisfaction that education and slavery were incompatible with each other. Frederick realizes what he must do to gain his power and freedom of his own. He ironically thanks Hugh Auld for this realization that opens a path to his freedom.
Frederick Douglass is without a doubt one of the biggest faces of abolitionism, and there's no question why. He has held rallies for millions of people and has spoken in front of thousands. He is well known throughout this unit of slavery. However, a defining statement Douglass has expressed in his autobiography that sums up the oppression throughout slavery is the following quote: "The white children could tell their ages. I could not tell why I ought to be deprived of the same privilege. A small child could notice the outrageous privilege gap between races. In a world where white people were able to have an education, wealth, human rights, and even a defined age, the oppression against African American people was unquestionable. It summarizes the racial oppression and heartache colored people went through. A child noticing he is denied opportunities and rights is a problem that stands tall and can't be ignored."